Trinidad and Tobago is a twin island sovereign state that is the southernmost nation in the Caribbean. Approximately 31,000 voyages pass within 25 nautical miles of Trinidad and Tobago each year, transiting the Panama Canal en route between the east coast of South America and the Pacific seaboard of the USA, between the west coast of South America and the Atlantic seaboard of the USA and Europe. The recent expansion of the Panama Canal will increase the already growing demand for ship repair and maintenance in the Caribbean region, which needs more shipyards capable of handling large vessels. The Brea Dry Dock project is therefore poised to capture the South American and Panamanian shipping traffic, as well as the very common offshore platform activities in this region. Located in the Gulf of Paria, which is considered to be one of the best.
Seems impressive, doesn't it? Well, in the end, sometimes they say, oh, that glitters isn't gold, but we're going to find out a little later. But before we begin our conversation with Afra Raymond, 2 earthquakes with similar magnitude shocked Trinidad and Tobago last night, shook Trinidad and Tobago last night. According to information obtained from the UE Seismic Research Center, the first earthquake, which measured 4.0, occurred around 7:53 p.m. at a latitude 11.07 degrees north and 61.56 longitude degrees west at a depth of 21 kilometers. Now, the second 4.2 magnitude earthquake struck at 11:34 p.m. at latitude 1041 degrees north, longitude 61.54 degrees west, and a depth of 40 kilometers. Both earthquakes were reportedly felt in areas such as Port of Spain, Arima, and San Fernando. On August 21st, a 6.9 earthquake rocked the country, and it resulted in damage to property and building across the country. We are moving to our discussion, and a little later we're going to tell you about a WASA disruption that's taking place. Minister Hunt may be joining us, but Afra Raymond is here, and we're talking about the strong Chinese connection. Are we returning to the Manning era?
It sounds like a crime movie from the 1970s, the French connection. The Chinese connection, I don't know if we're returning to the Patrick Manning era. We saw, I think it was at the end of last week, that Dr. Rowley announced the new project at Brea Dry Dock being done by China Harbour Engineering Limited, and that appears to be conducted under government-to-government arrangement, because I noticed that Dr. Rowley was, I believe a document was signed with the ambassador for China and so on. So it appears to be at a government-to-government level, although NITCO is the implementing agency at our end as a part of national infrastructure. So there's some interesting issues that arise. The video that you were showing at the beginning gives us an overview, and is a video prepared by the developer. And that video will really highlight the benefits of the project. So they talk about the employment, they talk about the possible earnings, the expected earnings of foreign exchange, and they talk about the sort of impact, positive impact on the country, and how Trinidad and Tobago could become a hub for that kind of activity, which is ship repair, and I suppose a degree of shipbuilding, because we've got some attributes. We're out of the hurricane belt, we've got a good access to the Gulf of Paria. Is a good harbor on the east coast of Americas. It's a very good harbor, and so on. And those proposed benefits have to be compared against some of the questions we have arising about the company doing the project, and of course also the whole arrangement. It's what I call the underlying commercial arrangement. What is the arrangement?
What is the arrangement? Because the firm was once blacklisted. It's no longer there. Are we crucifying them based on their past? Because a number of articles have now been put in the public domain. Well,
the firm was suspended by the World Bank. I think the suspension ended in January of 2017, so they're no longer a suspended firm, and they were suspended for improper practices around procurement and so on, and corruption and so. There is a large list of companies that suffer that type of suspension. I think the World Bank list of companies that are suspended is over 800 companies, and in fact the country in the world in 2017 that had the most companies on that list was Canada. It wasn't China, which is the sort of conversation some of this could be feeding into. The Canadian contractors had committed the most amount of offenses and listed as the greatest number of offenders within the World Bank list.
No one would have thought that. Okay.
This is just perspectives on the list. I think it was 118 out of 852 deregulated contractors were Canadians. So one has to have the discussion with a certain amount of attachment to the facts, as how I'd like to do it. So the first thing is that there are a series of complaints, and I would have to say a series of complaints in the global south. So we talk about Bangladesh, we talk about Guinea, we talk about Uganda. There are concerns in Jamaica, which I mean, you're just using the global south as a phrase. We talk about Jamaica, and all of those concerns relate to the whole procurement and governance and white-collar crime corruption issue about how the projects were conceived and approved and executed.
How was this project conceived, approved, and executed? Because
well, it hasn't been executed yet.
It hasn't?
It certainly seems to have been approved,
No.
given that the Prime Minister signed off on it.
In 2016, the Jamaican government had to come out and apologize and state that there was no bid rigging and that they were not paid bribes under the then Golding administration in relation to this particular firm.
Sure. So to start off with the three things I said conceptualization, approval, and execution. The first thing is that the whole project for a dry dock in Trinidad and Tobago has been around for a while, the proposal. There's a proposal that was existing within certain private quarters that was to have been done, proposed to be done on a reclaimed island in the Gulf of Paria, closer to Port of Spain, called Sullivan's Island. There's a Sullivan's Island proposal. There's another proposal that existed among local business people to be done on the same parcel of land at Brea that was floated in 2011 when the partnership was in office and so on. And that proposal didn't really take root and take ground. But there was also a comprehensive proposal for a development along these lines on that same parcel.
In the parcel of land.
That same parcel of land.
So is it a good deal?
Well, as I said, the project has attributes. So you have a project that would involve a tremendous amount of activity in the construction phase. You have a project that would involve a tremendous amount of high-value employment during its ongoing, as the project goes on, when you're repairing these ships and refitting them and so on. You have a project that could potentially earn a high amount of foreign exchange. So it's a net earner of foreign exchange, and from all three boxes, it's win-win-win insofar as the diversification thing is concerned, using our skilled and educated people. But because we won those wins, we won projects that have a high level of activity in the construction phase. We want projects that have a high level of activity, high-paid jobs during the life of the project as it goes forward after construction. And we want projects that earn the country foreign exchange and net earners of foreign exchange. We need to give these proposals special scrutiny because in this case here, I believe there are genuine questions one could ask.
What are some of the questions that you have? Because I've looked at the firm, particularly Chinese firms, and there's a whole debate as to whether the Chinese involvement on the African continent. There was a case in Sri Lanka where they were forced to give a facility back to the government because they couldn't repay the debt. Yes,
well, they had to give it back to the Chinese. The government had to give over a port to the Chinese in Sri Lanka. But the point I am making here, let's go back through it methodically. The first stage is the design and construction stage. And the question has to be asked, how many of those design and construction jobs or contracts are going to be given to local designers and contractors and people who have skills in relation to a project like that? Or is it going to be yet another Chinese project where in fact the only people who have employment and economic activity are the Chinese? So we need to be very alert to that first point. At the construction stage, how many of our people are going to be employed there? There's an unemployment question in the country. It's a real point. Dr. Rowley made a point when he spoke in relation to the upcoming, I suppose the word is retrenchment of petrol workers and so on.
Because I was going to say that.
As a first question, how many of those people are going to be employed in relation to this project during the construction stage? Is there a figure agreed? An agreement was signed with the Chinese government. I saw Dr. Rowley and the Chinese ambassador had a document in their hand. Has a figure been agreed? Is it 10%? Is it 5%? Is it whatever the Chinese want? What is the figure in terms of our people, whether they are welders or bricklayers or whatever, electricians, plumbers? What is the figure?
Is there a local content policy that is in place?
There isn't a firm local content policy. The local content proposals, there isn't a firm policy. That question is of critical importance, given the unemployment in the country. Because stepping back from the, stepping back from the construction stage a second, Hema, what I saw proposed was a situation in which the project is going to be financed by the Exim Bank of China.
Right.
Which means it's a loan, which means we have to pay back for it. So we are paying to construct these facilities, which could have a critical importance to the country going forward. Therefore, it's important for us as citizens who are paying for this. We are paying interest for it. We need to see, quite simply, what's in it for us as citizens, because even some of us who are here now, may not finish paying for it. Maybe the next generation has to finish paying for it. So the first question is, what is the economic activity within the country at the construction stage? The second point, when the project is finished, let's suppose it finishes on time and on budget as intended, and it starts operating as a dry dock.
Right.
And all of those activities start, is it going to be one of those facilities which only employs Chinese people? Are there any percentages or agreements or any stipulations as to what is our participation in that situation? How is that going to be managed?
You know, you look at the U.S. government and their congressional sittings where there are also websites. Every military contract that is signed, you have a name of the contractor, the details of the contract and the amount. And this is the U.S. government. Why do we still have to be having these conversations as to, well, what have you signed this government, what have you signed the people of our country to?
Yes, well, we have an addiction. I mean, some of us on a personal level and some of us on a national level, we have an addiction. We have a culture of secrecy, okay? And the culture of secrecy could lead us into a situation like this, where we have a project taking place, and I think I worked it out last night, it was 892 acres of public land, which is going to be funded by the public, as I explained, through the Exim Bank of China, and which is supposedly for the benefit of the public, as Dr. Rowley explained. So we have public land, public money, supposedly for the benefit of the public. What are the facts? We don't want secret development. We don't want any more secret development. We want development to take place in a transparent fashion that we know what are the terms and conditions that our country is signing up to. There's a degree of political trust. Pardon me, there's a degree of political trust that is part of the electoral process, which is how come Dr. Rowley's team won the election roughly 3 years ago. But that degree of political trust has to be exercised in reciprocity. And if you have been conducting a negotiation in our benefit and there are good terms and conditions, there shouldn't be any difficulty sharing with us what it is you've agreed.
And if we don't get these details, what are we going to do? Simply accept it and then probably wait till the next election or someone else to come on a political platform and have a press conference to say, well, these are the details of this deal?
Well, we have a little bit of a political seesaw, but this type of discourse and your invitations to come onto these programs is an important part of it in terms of raising the consciousness that we have to go beyond the promises or the statements of a politician, regardless of which party you support. We have to go beyond that and try to get to the fundamental facts, as I call it, the underlying commercial arrangements. What are the arrangements in relation to this project? For instance, in the video that you started off showing and in Dr. Rowley's statements, we have reference to $500 million US a year in terms of coming to the country. Now, again, I'm not clear, how is that coming to the country? It's a little bit like the $500 million at Sandals in Tobago, that I'm still not understanding how a company where you do all the bookings online, the money never gets to Trinidad and Tobago. It's somewhere up there in virtual space. How does $500 million come through our economy? I mean, it's like, what is it? You know, so we need to understand what are the arrangements, what are the terms and conditions. It's our country, it's our land, it's our money.
Should we be wary of the Chinese connection and China's new imperialistic thrust, particularly in developing countries and third world nations? And that's
absolutely, absolutely. Because what is at stake here is a question of sovereignty. We sacrificed, and our parents and our grandparents sacrificed to get us independence and sovereignty and Republican status, and so we made sacrifices. Different countries have different sacrifices. No doubt in Trinidad and Tobago there was a sacrifice, and it would be a pity, it would be a shame if we were to in fact squander the thing over stupidness. Because one of the ways that happens is that you overpay for things. Everybody in life knows that you have to borrow sometimes to progress, whether it's to buy a house or to buy a car or to furnish yourself with an education. It's very wise sometimes to make that effort and that sacrifice to borrow, to go to the next level. If in fact, however, you're borrowing 3 times more than you need to, you're going to bust on your average, which is what has happened in the country, because 2 out of every $3, when we do the studies of grand corruption in the country, 2 out of every $3 have been stolen or wasted. Therefore, we need to know what we're getting, what are we paying for, and how are we going to get a return from it.
Do you have any concerns about this, Brew?
Yeah, I do. I mean, at the moment, they're off the World Bank.
They're off the World Bank. So I looked at it and I thought, yeah.
Yeah, they're off the World Bank delisting, which is for a period. And I think the concerns could be comforted by us getting the details of what we've agreed. I
do want to ask my final question to you, the Curepe Interchange project.
Yes.
Now, we had a discussion earlier this morning. Obviously, we saw a rebuttal from the minister. You are familiar with this project. In fact, you've written about it.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm one of the practitioners that was being discussed in that back and forth about the value and the property and so on. But let me just say that the point Prakash Ramadar was making about the payment, the partial payment and people being asked to leave. He was absolutely spot on that point because the Land Acquisition Act of 1994 at Section 22 allows claimants to claim up to 80% of the money that the state is offering. So you can get a partial payment of most of the money to allow you to move on. And while Minister Sinanan was speaking, and he was speaking defensively about his position and the law being followed, I could say to Minister Sinanan, I have had requests, formal requests for Section 22 payments going into the Ministry of Works and Transport, which is under Minister Sinanan's command. And they aren't being honored, they aren't being replied to, okay, through NIDCO. So in fact, there are provisions in law to ameliorate the situation about a development process needing to get a piece of land now and the people needing money to move on to another place. There are provisions in law and those provisions are not being honored. So you need to, if you need to look at one thing, Minister Sinanan, let us look at setting up a procedure to respond to applications for advance payment of compensation. It's not happening, so Ramada is correct. It's not happening, it needs to happen. If it is not happening, what is happening is unfair. And if we went to court, the state would find itself in an embarrassment. I'm not an attorney.
This project?
I don't think so.
I know we're running out of time.
We're out of time, but I don't think so.
I'll pick up on that point a little later.
Another time.